Hi there, Ronnie here, coming at you with a video. Just been watching an episode of Criminal Minds, which is a show that I like very much, and I very much like shows that are dealing with the sort of psychological aspect of the criminal, rather than just them killing because they want to inherit a fortune, or robbing a bank because they're greedy, or the usual motives. And for me, that whole thing sort of started for me when I first watched Silence of the Lambs, and then later on watching shows like Cracker. The original UK one, not the US version, which was a bit of a watered down disaster if you ask me. And sort of, and then things like The Inside, and then going on to Criminal Minds, and when I used to run, I've said this in videos before, when I used to run at games, I was always worried about coming up with overly elaborate MOs and reasons for the killers, and whether or not they would actually make sense to the players. And then I realised it doesn't have to make sense to the players. It only has to make sense to the killer, the unsub. The motivation, it only has to make sense for their motivation. And it's got me thinking about characters in general in RPGs. Be they player characters or NPCs, should be more than words on a page. I've touched on this before about backgrounds. Motivation is the important part of any character. What drives them, what gets them up in the morning, gets them up and out. Now that motivation can be deeply personal and emotional, trying to find a loved one who's been, who's went missing, avenging the death of a loved one, having lost a loved one and finding yourself not knowing what to do with your life. And in wandering and trying to find something, you find yourself in your current predicament. Maybe your motivation is entirely money. And don't make the mistake of thinking that motivation, the money motivation, is purely the sort of thing of like murder hobos in a fantasy game, because it clearly isn't. You could be a mercenary after a big score. You could be a pilot who's, he's not flying these people for cheap. I mean, you go back to the original Star Wars. Han Solo's motivation for getting involved was a big payday because he had debts to clear. So when you're thinking about what they want, their motivation is money. Why? Always that question, why? I think, and I think in that respect, backgrounds are really great for motivation, for inspiring the character, giving them a reason to get up and get out. Inspires villains as well, antagonists and NPCs. And inspires them as well. And motivations can be incredibly simple. They can be quite complex. There's no simple, right or wrong way to do a character in regards to their, whether a motivation is simple or basic. I would suggest that if you're starting a new character right from sort of first level, make their motivation fairly straightforward. Make it simple, a nice linear, one note even, and allow the story of the character to add layers and complexity. You're looking for a loved one. You eventually find a loved one. It turns out they weren't lost. They've went in on the other side. They're now working for the sort of big bad evil guy who's going to take over the region. But you're still kin, you're still a friend. They don't want you harmed. It's interesting, if you watch, there's a wonderful film from the 90s called Heat with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and there's a very famous scene of the two of them just sitting having coffee with each other. And Al Pacino plays a robbery homicide detective, and De Niro's a career criminal he's wanting to catch. And he's not going to arrest him right there and then because he wants to catch him in the act. No point arresting him when he hasn't done anything. Or hasn't done anything they can prove. They want to catch him and his crew in the act and get them all. And the start of it is kind of intense between the two of them. They're setting their stall out. Pacino making it quite clear that, De Niro should stop this life, and De Niro making it quite clear that he's not gonna. And then they start talking to each other very naturally. Because one of the interesting parts of the film is, even though one is a cop and one's a criminal, they are so similar in so many ways with regards to how focused they are on the job. They're almost the perfect sort of yin-yang to each other. And you get the impression that if they weren't cop and criminal, If they were just two, as he says in the film, two regular fellas, or if both of them were part of the same crew, either as cops or criminals, they would probably be the best of friends. And they both acknowledge that. But then it ends with Pacino and De Niro again setting out their stall. With Pacino making it clear that, if De Niro's there, if he's going to put him down, he's not going to like it. But if it's between shooting De Niro or shooting some other poor sod who's going to get shot, then, De Niro's going down. And De Niro says there's a flip side to that coin. What if you do have me boxed in, and I've got to put you down? Because no matter what, you will not get in my way. He acknowledges, yeah, we've been face to face, but I will not hesitate, not for a second. So you have that bit, and you can tell that there's an admiration between them. And I won't tell you how the movie ends. Go and see it. Get out in Blu-ray or DVD or watch it on, Amazon Prime or something, whoever's got it. Because it's well worth watching if you've never seen it. But their motivations are compounded and complicated by the existence of each other. Each of them feel that in a sense they've got to up their game because they feel they've met their match, their sort of shadow, their opposite number. So a simple motivation has become complicated by the experience of the story being told. And that's what should happen in game. Don't rely on backgrounds for plot hooks. Plot hooks are nice, but they're not necessary. Use backgrounds for motivation. And use them to inspire the kind of character you are. Because also, for those games that use them, background and motivation can also determine alignment. Now, I'm not a big fan of alignment. I'm not a big fan of it at all. If I'm running a system that has alignments, then I use it, but I much prefer games that don't have an alignment system at all. But the psychology of your character is incredibly important. Who are you? What motivates you? What drives you? Why do you do this? If your character has a problem with, if it's a fantasy game, your character really has a problem with orcs. Why? Is it just because you see them as an embodiment of evil, or is there something about, maybe when you were a young child, an orc band attacked a caravan that you were in, and it's left a lasting scar. Those are interesting things. They don't need to be plot hooks. But when that situation comes up, it gives you great chances to role play. Not combat, but role play. I could do a whole other thing on the fact that on that issue, and I might. But yeah, psychology of characters. Lean into it. It doesn't have to make sense to other people. As long as it makes sense to you, motivates your character, and grounds your character so that all your actions make sense to you and you are consistent with that character. And I think you'll find your games are much more interesting for doing it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be back soon with another video.